Okay, I just got through listening to Skepp Torr's sober and thoughtful video on the recent tragedy that befell the lives of the Skeptic Feminist group. I really needed to listen to what he had to say, too. I've been getting lots of reports since last night about the jokes being made, the games of gotcha, and the gynocentric showboating that is already happening less than 24 hours after this heartbreaking event hit the news. I'll get to that last bit and the bone I have to pick about it toward the end, but first I want to start with some of my thoughts on Alexander and some of my reaction to Skepp Torr's video. I found myself unable to agree entirely with what Skepp had to say about the intent behind the skeptic feminist work, though I have to temper that statement by acknowledging that I didn't have the same connection to them that he did. Skepp Torr saw them as genuinely concerned about men's issues, but with perhaps just a different take on how these issues should be approached. I can't honestly say that I saw the same exact thing. I saw them like many feminists, which is to say I think they honestly believe that they are concerned for men and boys in the feminist model. With no intent to speak ill of anyone involved, I still have to maintain that in order to see feminist ideology as an ameliorative answer to men's issues, you must be woefully blind to a slew of issues affecting men, hateful feminist ideology being among them. The nightmare that befell these people doesn't change that. That is all I have to say on that, and besides, I think Skepp did just fine. I'm linking his video in the low bar. And there are two more good reasons why I'm going to move on. One, the minor one, is that my experience with the skeptic feminists was different than with other feminists. I engaged them in an online debate and found them unusually respectful and curious, two qualities I can rarely attribute to feminists. I appreciated that, but again, that is really the minor point here. The other reason, the really important one, is that a woman is dead and a man's life is now shattered. What is really important here is trying to cast aside the internet mockery, the jokes, and the misguided mainstream style show of supporting women to understand why this happened. Part of the difficulty here is that we don't know that much. We know a woman is dead and that a man, an alleged murderer, is in jail. We also have more information that appears to be plausible. That Alexander committed this horrible act under the influence of a psychoactive drug, and that as a combat vet, he had post-traumatic stress disorder. If that is true, we have two victims here, not one. I understand my friend Skepp's anger at Alexander for using psychoactive drugs and having a gun at the same time. I share some of that anger and the grief he must feel over this whole rotten mess. But I still want to push further into this because it's a very important subject, and because it leads to the bone I have to pick with an internet personality over his response to it. It'll be helpful for anyone interested in more than the easily digested media soundbite quality answers to be had in this to have an understanding of PTSD. And like Skepp, I will qualify that I'm talking about real combat-related PTSD, not the kind feminists claim to get because someone talked about rape in a law class or because someone disagreed with them on social media. PTSD, to put it bluntly, is hell. It's marked by a range of symptoms that can and do drive a lot of people totally over the edge. Imagine having traumatic, terrifying memories that come at you constantly like a freight train. I'm not talking about memories that just upset or that bring up emotional discomfort, but raging, unstoppable, fully conscious nightmares that have the power to take you out of reality and put you back into reliving the trauma in flashbacks exactly as if you had been transported back in time to when they happened. The sleep of PTSD sufferers is often savaged by nightmares of similar intensity. The lives of PTSD sufferers often become dominated by efforts to avoid the memories. That includes the avoidance of seeking help, because seeking help involves talking about the trauma. It also includes the excessive use of alcohol and other drugs in an effort to escape. And yes, that includes the kind of drugs that Alexander is alleged to have taken. People with PTSD frequently seek to avoid people and places that remind them of the trauma and therefore put them at risk of triggering a flashback. Soldiers who were wounded in IED attacks in vehicles sometimes have great difficulty driving or even getting in a car for that reason. There are also very profound changes in mood and self-image. In severe cases, they become self-loathing, riddled with guilt, often for having survived when others didn't, and obsessed with dark thoughts about themselves and others. They become detached from family and friends. They become hypervigilant, always on guard from potential dangers, and are subject to irrational, angry outbursts that are beyond their control. They can attack other people literally not knowing where they are or what they're doing, and they kill themselves at staggering rates. It is estimated that 22 to 25 American combat vets from the Middle East wars a day take their own lives. That is nothing new. It happens in all wars. I once read a quote from a combat vet in one of Warren Farrell's books that resonates with me today as I consider the current tragedy. "I got killed in Vietnam," said the vet. "I just didn't know it at the time." And this is what we need to understand. The actions of those who suffer PTSD are by and large not actions over which they have any appreciable level of control. We have little choice but to hold them responsible, as I am sure will happen with Alexander, and I hope that there is some help for him during his incarceration, but I'm not hopeful about it. He will likely just show up in prison as the man who murdered his girlfriend, no other explanation needed or wanted. He will just be another veteran we used up and ignored until the tragedy happened. Or worse, we will reserve our grief and compassion for the only victim we imagine matters, the woman who was killed. That's how we do it in America, and I suspect the rest of the world as well. And that brings me to the bone I have to pick in this. T.J. Kirk, also known as the Amazing Atheist, armed with more or less the same information we all have, showed his compassion for what happened by donating money to the alleged advocacy for curtailing violence against women. That is what T.J., a very high-profile anti-feminist, saw in this, and apparently nothing more. So he responded to the tragedy by giving money to an organization that operates off of the Duluth model of domestic violence. Let me tell you why that is such a gynocentric, weak, and fucked up move. The Duluth model asserts in no uncertain terms that violence against women has one source and one source only: patriarchy. To Duluth proponents, violence against women is and can be nothing but an extension of male social and political dominance into the home. The subscribers to the Duluth model depend financially on this worldview and work actively, sometimes viciously, to suppress anything else that explains violence. That includes violence rooted in family dysfunction, in poor mental health, in poverty, in a history of childhood physical abuse of the perpetrator. It includes violence related to post-traumatic stress disorder. These are the very people responsible for much of our social blindness to the true causes of violence. They profit from pointing all violence, including that allegedly committed by Alexander, to an imaginary patriarchy without giving a damn about what is actually causing the suffering and death of innocence. They are, quite honestly, the reason why it was pretty hard for me to take the Skeptic Feminists or any other kind of feminist seriously. And this is where TJ threw his money and his support. The larger lesson here is one that I've been harping on for a while. It is why I occasionally have less than kind words for some people in the anti-feminist community. In my mind, there are basically three different kinds of anti-feminism. There's the anti-feminism of gyno-traditionalists who care about as much for men's issues as feminists. There's the anti-feminism of those who actually do care about men's issues, be they MRA, MGTOW, or non-aligned. And then we have the entertainment anti-feminists, who ultimately don't give a damn about much of anything. Speaking up about entertainment anti-feminists comes with some cost to men's advocates. People like TJ are popular, and for good reason. They're great entertainers, very gifted at what they do, and they criticize some very toxic ideas, like feminism, to very impressively sized audiences. For that alone, we tend to see them as virtuous, and we can even mistake them for people who are informed and who care, when they are sometimes neither. The fight to raise awareness about men's issues is a very hard one. Gynocentrism is a formidable and ever-elusive shifting obstacle. So is the apathy of people who appear to care about the real problems, only to disappoint by becoming the embodiment of those very same problems. But the fight is worth fighting. For Alexander and for the other innocent life that was lost. Neither of them deserved what happened, nor do either of them deserve money being thrown at the very people who would silence a discussion that might lead to answers. Thanks for listening.